But there's an unwritten story, Sri, about even those tariffs from 8 and 4 years ago. And that is President Trump and his United States trade representative put in place a process by which petitioners, oftentimes manufacturers, could seek exemptions or exceptions to the tariff. And by the time the Trump term had completed, a very, very large portion of the goods that otherwise would have been subject to the tariffs were exempted. So now American industry or global industry has an experience with the exemption process, and I can expect they will be seeking exemptions and exceptions to the Trump tariffs almost as soon as they're put in place.
So this could be a negotiating tactic. This is all transactional. It's the art of the deal, and all of that is going to be part of the narrative. But many economists are making the clear parallel between what we could see under the incoming administration and the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930. We saw how destabilizing that was. Is history going to repeat itself, David?
Well, it's true that economists thought they had seen the last of, broad-based and deep tariffs with the Great Depression. But I think there is a protectionist sentiment in the American electorate. Donald Trump tapped into it. He won a very big mandate on Election Day only a couple of weeks ago, and I think he is going to do exactly as you have suggested, Sri. He's going to use tariffs to create the environment, to create leverage in order to strike a deal. And in this region, the grand bargain, of course, will be with Beijing. It's a U.S.-China deal that I think will build on the Phase 1 deal that was signed during the first Trump administration. As a reminder, the tariffs created the conditions for that Phase 1 deal, I think in the second or beginning of the third year of the first Trump term, and it was quite successful for the United States. China became the largest consumer of American agricultural products as a result, and it remains the largest consumer of American agriculture today.
China's economy is already quite fragile, so do they have an appetite to fight a trade war if it does come to that? Or could Beijing play hardball and impose countervailing duties of its own? And do we go down a retaliatory tit for tat and supply chains suffer, inflationary forces are unleashed again? That is a worst case scenario, but how probable is that?
Well, you've described the risk perfectly, and it's hard to handicap it without having some numbers and really understanding the facts. But you pointed out something very important, which is that China is in a sluggish place now, and President Xi has a project in front of him, and that is to rebuild Chinese consumer confidence and restore very high levels of growth of the Chinese economy. And President Trump and his team probably look at that as an advantage and look at that as part of what creates the conditions for a grand bargain. I'm not the right one to do the psychology on Donald Trump, but I do think he is going to do what many presidents do in their second and final term, and that is try to cement their legacy in American history. Donald Trump sees himself, I think, in some ways as a Ronald Reagan type of president, a strong man, willing to do big deals and work with the use of his personal relationships. And I think he believes he has a personal relationship with President Xi. He had 11 different one-on-one calls with Xi Jinping during his presidency. It's a big number, and I expect he'll engage directly at the very top in Beijing.
But David, let's bring it back to Main Street USA and the cost of living crisis. If the tariff regime and if the tariff plan does backfire, the US consumer will end up having to carry the can. Tariffs are taxes in the form of higher inflation. Isn't there a risk it's all going to backfire?
Absolutely. Look, the economists are virtually universal in their opinion that tariffs on imports of foreign goods, the costs of those tariffs are ultimately borne by American consumers. That was the case during the first Trump term, at least on the goods that were not subject to the exceptions or the exemptions, of course, and that will be the case again. And there is a tension because Donald Trump returns to the White House in part because of American consumers' anxiety over inflation during the Biden years. So here he is with a strategy that threatens to return American consumers to those sort of inflationary problems and burdens. So he's got a little bit of a tightrope to walk.